Welcome, warriors and history lovers. Before we dive into this incredible Viking tale, smash that like button if you're ready for an epic adventure, subscribe to join our Viking Brotherhood, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Whether you're in Norway, Canada, Brazil, or anywhere else, your support keeps these legendary stories alive. The bitter winds of the North Sea carved through my weathered cloak as I stood at the edge of the fjord, watching the last longship of my clan disappear into the misty horizon. My name is Gunnar Ironwolf, though that name now carries the weight of shame rather than honor. The scar across my left cheek, a memento from my failed raid on the Saxon settlements, throbbed in the cold morning air, a constant reminder of why I was no longer welcome among the Ironwolf clan. 3 days had passed since Jarl Ragnar, my own uncle, had declared me Nidinga, a man without honor, cast out from our people. The accusation still burned in my chest like molten iron. Cowardice in battle. They said I had fled when our brothers needed me most, leaving young Olaf Thunderstrike to die alone against a Saxon warband. The truth was more complicated, but truth mattered little when blood was spilled and blame needed to be assigned. I pulled my sealskin boots tighter as I began my descent from the cliff's edge, following a narrow path that wound between jagged rocks and stunted pine trees. My supplies were meager: dried fish, hard bread, a waterskin half full of ale, and my father's battle axe, skull splitter, the only thing they allowed me to take. The weapon's worn ash handle felt cold against my palm, its steel head nicked and scarred from countless battles. It was all I had left of my heritage, of the man I used to be. The landscape around me was unforgiving, a wilderness of black stone and twisted trees, where even the heartiest moss struggled to find purchase. This was the Shadowlands, a cursed stretch of territory between the known world and whatever lay beyond the northern wastes. No Viking had ever returned from these lands, and few were foolish enough to venture here. But for an outcast with nowhere else to go, it seemed fitting. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desolate terrain, I found myself thinking of my childhood. I remembered sitting by the great hearth in Ragnar's hall, listening to the skalds tell tales of ancient heroes and mythical beasts. Old Thorvald Storyteller would lean forward, his one good eye gleaming in the firelight, and speak of dragons that dwelt in the far reaches of the world, creatures of immense power and ancient wisdom. "Dragons are not mere beasts," he would whisper, his voice carrying over the crackling flames. "They are the keepers of old secrets, the guardians of forgotten knowledge. To meet a dragon is to touch the very essence of the world's creation." I had dismissed such tales as mere entertainment for children, but now, walking through this forsaken land, I found myself wondering if perhaps there was truth hidden in those old stories. The terrain grew more treacherous as the day wore on. Loose shale slipped beneath my feet, sending small avalanches of stone tumbling down the mountainside. The air grew thinner, and my breath came in visible puffs despite the late summer season. I paused frequently to rest, not from exhaustion, but from the strange sense that I was being watched. The feeling prickled at the back of my neck like ice-cold fingers, and more than once I spun around with skull splitter raised, only to find empty rock and shadow behind me. As evening approached, I found myself in a narrow valley carved between two towering peaks. The valley floor was strewn with massive boulders, some as large as Viking longhouses, and strange formations of black glass that caught the dying light like frozen lightning. In the center of the valley, impossibly, a small grove of ancient oak trees stood untouched by the harsh climate. Their leaves were gold and crimson, as if touched by eternal autumn, and their massive trunks seemed to pulse with inner warmth. I approached the grove cautiously, my warrior's instincts screaming that this place was touched by powers beyond mortal understanding. The temperature here was noticeably warmer, and I could hear the gentle trickle of running water. Hidden among the oak roots, I discovered a natural spring that bubbled up from deep within the earth. The water was crystal clear and surprisingly warm to the touch. Setting down my pack, I knelt beside the spring and cupped the water in my hands. It tasted of minerals and something else, something that reminded me of the sea on a storm-tossed night, wild and electric. As I drank, I felt strength returning to my weary limbs, and the constant ache in my scarred cheek began to fade. This would be my camp for the night. I gathered fallen branches and built a small fire between the massive oak roots, the flames casting dancing shadows on the ancient bark. As I sat warming myself and sharing my meager rations, I began to feel something I hadn't experienced since my exile: peace. The night sky above the valley was unlike anything I had ever seen. Stars blazed with unusual brightness, and strange lights danced across the heavens in curtains of green and gold. It was as if the very gods were putting on a display just for me, a lone outcast in the wilderness. I found myself thinking of my father, Eirik Ironwolf, who had died in a raid when I was barely old enough to lift a sword. He would have loved this place, the wild beauty, the sense of ancient power that seemed to emanate from the very stones. As the fire burned lower, I wrapped myself in my cloak and settled against one of the great oak trunks. Sleep came surprisingly easily, despite the strangeness of my surroundings. But my dreams were filled with visions that would change everything I thought I knew about the world. In my dreams, I soared through star-filled skies on wings of silver and gold. Below me, the earth spread out like a vast tapestry, and I could see the threads that connected all living things, the invisible bonds that tied beast to man, stone to tree, and mortal to divine. And through it all, a presence watched me with ancient eyes, evaluating, judging, perhaps even approving. I woke before dawn to find that my small fire had burned down to glowing embers, but the grove was still warm and welcoming. More importantly, I was no longer alone. Across the clearing, barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom, a massive shape moved among the trees. At first, I thought it might be a bear or perhaps an enormous elk, but as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized I was looking at something far more extraordinary. The creature was easily the size of a longship, with scales that shimmered like polished bronze in the fading starlight. Its head, held high on a serpentine neck, was both reptilian and oddly noble, with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. Wings, folded against its massive flanks, bore membranes stretched between finger bones that looked strong enough to break oak trees. This was no mere animal. This was a dragon, as real and magnificent as any from the old tales. Our eyes met across the clearing, and I felt a jolt of recognition that went beyond the physical. This was the presence I had sensed watching me during my journey, the ancient intelligence that had filled my dreams. The dragon tilted its great head, studying me with the same careful attention I might give to a piece of fine metalwork, looking for flaws or hidden strengths. "Gunnar Ironwolf," the dragon spoke, its voice not heard with my ears but felt directly in my mind, like thunder rolling through my bones. "Son of Eirik, grandson of Harold Blackbeard, last of the true warriors of your line." I struggled to my feet, skull splitter heavy in my grip, though I made no move to raise it. Everything I had ever been taught told me that dragons were creatures of destruction and greed, beings to be feared and fought. Yet this magnificent creature radiated not menace, but a deep, abiding sadness that seemed to echo my own exile and loss. "You know me, Great One," I managed to say, surprised that my voice remained steady. "But I do not know you, though I sense that our meeting was not chance." The dragon's massive head dipped in what might have been a nod. "I am Valdris the Ancient, last of the Skyfather's children, guardian of the old ways that your people have forgotten. I have watched your kind for 1,000 seasons, seen your clans rise and fall, witnessed the slow fading of honor and courage in the hearts of men." Valdris settled onto the grove floor, his massive bulk somehow moving with surprising grace. Even lying down, his head was level with mine, and I could feel the heat radiating from his scales, see the ancient scars that crisscrossed his hide, evidence of battles fought in ages past. "Your clan cast you out for cowardice. Valdres continued, his mental voice tinged with something that might have been amusement. "Yet I saw what truly happened in that Saxon village. You did not flee from fear, young warrior. You chose to save the children instead of seeking glory in meaningless slaughter." The memory hit me like a physical blow. Young Olaf, barely 16 and eager to prove himself, had charged into the Saxon settlement, screaming war cries and swinging his sword at anything that moved. I had seen the children hiding in a burning hut, their faces streaked with tears and soot, and in that moment, something inside me had rebelled against the bloodlust that drove my companions. While Olaf fought and died against overwhelming odds, I had spent precious moments leading those Saxon children to safety, carrying the youngest on my shoulders as fire consumed their home. By the time I returned to the battle, Olaf was surrounded and cut down, and my clan brothers saw only that I had been absent in their moment of need. "You saw," I whispered, the weight of that terrible day settling on my shoulders once again. "You know the truth." "I know many truths," Valdres replied. "I know that your people have forgotten what it means to be truly strong. They mistake cruelty for courage, slaughter for victory. But in you, I see the ember of something greater, something worth preserving." The dragon's great eyes, golden as molten amber, held mine steadily. "The world is changing, Gunnar Ironwolf. The old gods are fading, new beliefs are spreading across the lands like wildfire, and the age of dragons draws to its close. Soon, there will be no place left in this world for creatures like me, or for warriors who remember what honor truly means." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that perhaps the gods have brought us together for a reason," Valdres said. "You are cast out from your people, and I am the last of mine. Perhaps it is time for old enemies to become something else entirely." 3 months had passed since that first dawn encounter with Valdres, and my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The ancient dragon had not only accepted me into his domain, but had begun to share with me the accumulated wisdom of millennia. Where once I had been Gunnar the Outcast, now I was becoming something entirely new, though I was still discovering exactly what that might be. The grove had become our shared sanctuary, but Valdres had shown me that it was far more than just a cluster of ancient oaks. The trees were connected to a vast network of roots that extended throughout the valley, carrying messages and energy between every living thing in this hidden realm. The warm spring was fed by underground rivers that flowed from the heart of the earth itself, carrying minerals and essences that could heal wounds and strengthen both body and spirit. "Your people think in terms of seasons and years," Valdres explained one morning as we sat beside the spring, watching the sunrise paint the valley walls in shades of gold and crimson. "But time moves differently when you have lived as long as I have. I have seen ice ages come and go, watched mountains rise from the sea and crumble to dust. From that perspective, the troubles of any single clan or kingdom are like ripples on a vast ocean, significant to those who experience them, but ultimately temporary." I had grown accustomed to these philosophical discussions. Valdres seemed to take genuine pleasure in having someone to talk with, someone who could appreciate the depth of his knowledge and experience. Through our conversations, I was learning that dragons were not the mindless beasts of destruction depicted in human stories, but rather creatures of profound intelligence and ancient wisdom. "But that doesn't mean individual lives don't matter," I said, running my fingers through the warm water. Over the past months, my body had grown stronger than it had ever been. The dragon's food, strange fruits and roots that grew in hidden corners of the valley, had enhanced my natural strength and speed. My scars were fading, and I could feel power flowing through my veins like liquid fire. "No," Valdres agreed, his massive head turning toward me. "Each life has its own significance, its own role in the greater pattern. Your life, for instance, has brought you here, to this moment, to serve a purpose you do not yet fully understand. Ndun, that purpose had been revealing itself gradually through our training sessions. Valdris had been teaching me not just physical skills, but ways of thinking and perceiving the world that no human had ever learned. He showed me how to read the subtle signs in weather patterns that could predict storms days in advance, how to understand the language of animals and plants, and most remarkably, how to touch the deep currents of energy that flowed through all living things. The power you're learning to access, Valdris had explained during one of our first lessons, is what your people once called Seder, the magic of seeing and shaping. But they understood only fragments of the true art. Dragons have been masters of Seder since the world was young. These lessons took place in various locations throughout our hidden valley. There was the Singing Stone, a massive crystal formation that resonated with different tones depending on how you touched it, where Valdris taught me to hear the music that connected all things. The Mirror Pool, perfectly still water, that reflected not just images but emotions and intentions, where I learned to see beyond the surface of appearances. And the Bone Garden, where the remains of ancient creatures had been arranged in precise patterns that somehow focused and amplified mystical energy. But it was our combat training that truly revealed how much I was changing. Valdris could not fight alongside me directly. His size made it impossible, but he could conjure illusions and manifestations of energy that provided more challenging opponents than any human warrior I had ever faced. "Your people fight with strength and skill," he observed, as I battled against a phantasm he had created, a spectral warrior that moved with inhuman speed and struck with the force of lightning. "But they do not fight with understanding. They see their opponent as separate from themselves, something to be overcome through superior force. True warriors understand that all conflict is ultimately internal." The spectral warrior's blade swept toward my head in an arc that would have decapitated me instantly. But instead of blocking or dodging, I did something that would have been impossible months earlier. I shifted my perception, seeing the attack not as an external threat but as part of a larger dance of energy and intention. The blade passed harmlessly through the space where my head had been, not because I had moved, but because I had aligned myself with the flow of the attack rather than opposing it. "Better," Valdris rumbled approvingly as the illusion dissolved. "You are beginning to understand that strength without wisdom is merely destruction, while wisdom without strength is merely philosophy. True power comes from uniting both." These lessons were not without their challenges. There were days when the effort of learning to perceive reality in entirely new ways left me physically and mentally exhausted. More than once, I found myself questioning whether I was losing my humanity in the process of gaining these extraordinary abilities. "What am I becoming?" I asked Valdris one evening as we watched the aurora dance across the star-filled sky. "I can feel myself changing, becoming something that is no longer entirely human. Sometimes I worry that I'm losing who I was." The dragon was quiet for a long moment, his great eyes reflecting the shifting colors of the northern lights. "You are becoming what you were always meant to be," he said finally. "The division between human and dragon, between mortal and eternal, these are artificial boundaries created by limited understanding. In the deepest sense, all consciousness is one consciousness experiencing itself from different perspectives." He shifted his massive bulk, settling more comfortably among the ancient oaks. "Your clan cast you out because you showed mercy to enemy children. They called this cowardice because they could not recognize it as evolution, the next step beyond the simple warrior mindset that values only strength and conquest." As autumn deepened into winter, our training intensified. Valdris began teaching me secrets that he claimed no dragon had ever shared with a human before. He showed me how to project my consciousness beyond my physical body to see events happening in distant places and times. Through this ability, I watched my former clan struggling through a harsh winter, their food stores running low and their morale even lower since my exile. "They need a strong leader," I observed, watching Jarl Ragnar pace his great hall like a caged wolf. "My uncle is brave in battle, but he lacks the vision to guide them through truly difficult times." And yet they cast out the one person who might have provided that leadership. Valdris noted with characteristic irony, "Such is the way of mortals. They often destroy what they most need out of fear and misunderstanding." But these glimpses of my former life only reinforced how much I had changed. The concerns that had once seemed so important, clan honor, raiding success, the approval of other warriors, now felt small and temporary compared to the vast perspectives I was gaining through Valdris's teaching. The real test of my transformation came on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Valdris had been preparing me for something he called the deep teaching, but he had refused to explain what it would involve. "Some knowledge cannot be conveyed through words or demonstrations," he had said mysteriously. "It must be experienced directly, at the level of the soul itself." On that longest night, as the aurora blazed overhead with unusual intensity, Valdris led me to a part of the valley I had never seen before, hidden behind a waterfall that had frozen into a cascade of blue-white ice. We found a cave that descended deep into the mountain's heart. The walls were lined with crystals that glowed with their own inner light, creating patterns that seemed to shift and dance as we passed. "This is the heart chamber," Valdris explained as we entered a vast circular cavern deep within the mountain. "Here, the Earth's life force is concentrated and focused. Here, the boundary between individual consciousness and universal awareness becomes thin enough to cross." In the center of the chamber stood something that took my breath away, a pool of liquid that seemed to contain captured starlight, its surface reflecting not the cavern ceiling, but distant galaxies and nebulae. The pool was perhaps 10 feet across, surrounded by carved symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they contained more meaning than human perception could process. "The pool of origins," Valdris said softly. "It has existed since the world's creation, a direct connection to the source of all consciousness, all life, all possibility. To enter it is to experience existence from the perspective of the universe itself." I stared at the impossible water, feeling both drawn to it and terrified by what it might represent. "What happens if I enter?" "You will understand everything," Valdris replied. "And in understanding everything, you will become capable of choosing your true path with complete awareness of its consequences." The dragon's great head lowered until it was level with mine, his ancient eyes holding depths of knowledge and sorrow that I was only beginning to comprehend. "I will not lie to you, young warrior. This choice cannot be undone. If you enter the pool, you will emerge as something beyond human, beyond dragon, beyond the categories your people use to define reality. You will become a bridge between worlds, a guardian of balance in times of great change." I stood at the edge of the pool of origins, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down on my shoulders. Behind me lay everything I had ever been: Viking warrior, clan member, son of Eric Ironwolf. Ahead lay something entirely unknown, a path that would lead me far beyond the boundaries of human experience. "And if I choose not to enter?" Valdris's expression grew infinitely sad. "Then you will remain as you are, powerful by human standards, but ultimately limited by mortal perspective. You will live a good life, perhaps even a heroic one, but you will never fulfill the potential that brought us together." The aurora outside seemed to be calling to me, its colors streaming through cracks in the cavern ceiling and reflecting off the pool's impossible surface. I thought of my clan, struggling through their darkest winter. I thought of the Saxon children I had saved, and the price I had paid for that moment of mercy. I thought of all the violence and suffering in the world, all the conflicts born from fear and misunderstanding. "Will I still be me?" I asked, the question barely a whisper. "You will be more yourself than you have ever been," Valdris replied. "You will be who you were meant to be from the moment of your birth." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath of the crystal-scented air, and stepped forward into the pool. The water was warm as a summer morning and electric as a lightning strike. As it closed over my head, I felt my consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of my physical form, beyond the cavern, beyond the mountain, beyond the earth itself. I became aware of every living thing in creation, felt their joys and sorrows as if they were my own, understood the vast web of connections that bound all existence together. And in that moment of ultimate understanding, I finally knew what I was meant to become. 10 years have passed since that winter solstice when I emerged from the pool of origins as something new, no longer human, not quite dragon, but a guardian of the balance between worlds. I've taken the name Dragonborn, for I am the son that Valdris raised when my own clan cast me out, shaped by his wisdom and empowered by ancient forces beyond mortal comprehension. The world has changed much in those years. New kingdoms have risen, old gods have faded, and the age of dragons has indeed come to its end, all save one. Valdris remains my teacher and companion, though he grows weaker with each passing season, his ancient fire finally beginning to dim after countless millennia. From our valley sanctuary, I watch over the affairs of mortals, intervening when the balance threatens to tip too far toward darkness. Sometimes I appear as a wandering warrior, teaching lost souls the difference between strength and brutality. Other times, I work through dreams and visions, guiding leaders toward wisdom rather than conquest. My former clan has prospered under new leadership. My cousin Eric, who learned from his father's mistakes and leads with both courage and compassion. They still tell stories of Gunnar the Outcast, not knowing that he watches over them still, transformed beyond their recognition, but never forgetting the bonds of kinship and honor that shaped his youth. The world has many challenges ahead. New invaders from distant lands, changing climates, the eternal struggle between wisdom and ignorance. But for the first time in centuries, it also has guardians who understand that true strength lies not in domination, but in protection, not in conquest, but in cultivation of what is noble and worthy in the human spirit. I am the bridge between ages, the keeper of ancient wisdom in times of change, the dragon's son who learned that sometimes the greatest victories come from choosing mercy over vengeance, understanding over judgment, love over fear. And in the depths of our hidden valley, where aurora light dances through ancient oak leaves and the spring of origins bubbles with eternal warmth, the last dragon and his chosen son prepare for whatever challenges the future may bring. Remember to like this video. If this epic tale moved you, subscribe for more legendary Viking stories, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Until next time, may your own journey lead you to discover the dragon within yourself.